Northern Waters. First time I met Soren Bergstrom. His research vessel was sinking in the North Atlantic, and I had exactly 47 minutes to decide whether to follow orders or follow my gut. My name is Nathan Cross. I'm 25 years old, third generation Coast Guard, and I've been stationed at the Portland, Maine sector for 18 months. I grew up in Massachusetts watching my grandfather and father serve, attended the academy, and got assigned to the Northeast because that's where the water is coldest and the rescues are most unforgiving. My command sees me as reliable by the book, the kind of officer who follows protocol to the letter because protocol keeps people alive, except when it does and single quotes T. The call came at 14:30 hours on a Wednesday in September. A Norwegian research vessel, the Fram Nordisk, had encountered mechanical failure during a study of North Atlantic current patterns. They were taking on water. The storm system moving in from the northeast was going to hit them in 2 hours. And they had 17 people on board. The nearest Coast Guard cutter was mine, the USCGC Northwind, a heavy icebreaker based out of Portland. We could reach them in 90 minutes. The problem was that reaching them would put us directly in the path of a nor'easter. That was going to be the worst storm of the season. I was in the command center. When the captain made the call, "We're deploying," he said. "Full crew, immediate launch." "Cross, you're commanding the rescue operation." Sir," I responded. Standard acknowledgement. Inside, my pulse had shifted into a different gear. We launched in 42 minutes. My crew was sharp. I had Marcus on navigation, Elena piloting, Sarah coordinating with the Norwegian vessel, and 12 more specialists trained for exactly this kind of maritime disaster. The ocean was already angry by the time we cleared the harbor, swells at 12 feet and rising. The sky the color of a bruise. Status on the Fram. I called to Sarah. "They're stabilizing for now," she reported. "Taking on water in the engine room. They've got portable pumps running, but they're losing the battle. Captain estimates they've got for hours before the vessel becomes unmaneuverable." And the weather? Storm arrives in 1 hour 50 minutes. Winds will be 45 to 60 knots. Seas building to 20 feet, which meant we had exactly 1 hour and 20 minutes to reach them, establish rescue protocol, and get people off that vessel before conditions made it impossible. The math was tight. The margin for error was 0. We were 2 hours out when the first complication arrived via radio. "North wind. This is Fram Nordisk." A voice came through, calm but with an undercurrent of stress. Scandinavian accent, precise English. "We have a situation. The captain has ordered evacuation, but I have personnel who are refusing to abandon the vessel. They're attempting to salvage critical research data before water reaches the servers." "Roger that, Fram," Sarah responded. "Stand by." I was already moving toward the radio. "Put me through to them." "Fram Nordisk. This is Lieutenant Cross, USCGC Northwind. I'm commanding the rescue operation. Understand you have personnel refusing evacuation?" A pause, then affirmative. "We have 5 research staff who believe the data we've collected can provide crucial information about ocean current disruption in the North Atlantic. They're attempting to transfer it to external drives. Without this data, months of research years of preparation is lost." "Sir, I understand the value of your research, but we don't have time. I'm aware of the time constraints." "Lieutenant," the accent was thicker now, the urgency more apparent. "But this data could change climate policy. It could influence marine protection decisions for the entire Atlantic ecosystem. These 5 people, they know the value. They're willing to accept the risk. That's not a decision they can make unilaterally." I said, "Protocol, training, regulation. Your crew's safety is the priority. Data can be recovered later. Data underwater is irrecoverable, Lieutenant. Servers in salt water are destroyed. Once we lose this." He stopped. "I'm trying to explain why this matters. Can you understand that?" There was something in his voice that made me listen. Not just the accent, not just the desperation, but the clarity. This person knew exactly what he was asking, understood the risk, and was making a conscious choice anyway. "What's your name?" I asked. "Dr. Soren Bergstrom, Chief Research Coordinator for the Fram Nordisk Climate Study." Dr. Bergstrom, I need those 5 people topside and ready for evacuation when we arrive. I can give you 30 minutes to salvage what you can, but after that, everyone comes off that ship. That's not negotiable. Lieutenant, 30 minutes isn't enough. It's all I have. Work with it. I killed the connection before he could argue further. Turn to Elena, best speed to intercept. Already there, sir, she said. Current speed, 22 knots. Edit to Fram, 53 minutes. 40 minutes later, the storm arrived. It hit like a physical force wind, suddenly screaming, the north wind bucking in the swells like something alive. The sky turned from gray to black in what felt like seconds. The ocean wasn't water anymore. It was chaos with temporary organization, mountains of dark gray rising and falling, spray hitting the windows hard enough to sound like bullets. Status. I called, waves building to 18 feet and rising. Elena reported. Wind steady at 52 knots, gusting to 63. From structural integrity compromised. They're taking on water faster than the pumps can handle. ETA? 28 minutes. I was doing the math in my head. Storm conditions meant limited visibility. Limited visibility meant increased risk for the rescue helicopter and inflatable boats. Increased risk meant people died, but if we didn't go, people definitely died. All hands, prepare rescue stations, I ordered. We're going in. The Fram Nordisk appeared through the storm like a ghost, a Norwegian research vessel that had been designed for Arctic conditions, but wasn't designed for this. She was listing slightly to starboard, clearly struggling in the swells. Her deck lights cut through the rain and spray, and I could see crew members working frantically on the bridge. Fram, this is north wind, Sarah called. We have visual. Beginning approach pattern. All personnel prepare for immediate evacuation. North wind, this is Fram. The voice came back. Bergstrom. We need 5 more minutes. The servers are, Dr. Bergstrom, you've had your 30 minutes. Everyone topside. Now, Lieutenant, you don't understand. This data represents 8 years of Dr. Bergstrom. I cut him off. Cold. Professional. People die in storms. Dieter doesn't. Get your people on deck. Static. Then understood. North wind. All personnel are moving to evacuation stations. Standing by. The rescue was textbook chaos. We maneuvered the north wind alongside the Fram in seas that kept trying to smash the 2 vessels together. Our rescue swimmers went into water that was 43 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to incapacitate in minutes. The helicopter above us, a Jayhawk from our parent unit, was holding position in wind gusts that kept threatening to tear it from the sky. 17 people in chaos. One at a time, we pulled them from the Fram's deck, got them into the water, and had our rescue swimmers bring them to our inflatable boats. No deaths, no injuries. Pure professionalism and training and luck. But there were 18 people coming across. Not 17. Fram, we have 18 personnel accounted for, Elena called. Manifest shows 17 crew plus 1 additional. Who's the extra? That would be me. Bergstrom's voice came through. I'm the last one off. I was already moving toward the deck when he appeared, soaked, exhausted, clutching a waterproof case like it was a child. One of our rescue swimmers grabbed him, started bringing him toward the water, and Bergstrom was fighting him. The dater. He was shouting, "Don't lose the dater. We've got it." The swimmer yelled back, "Just get in the water." I grabbed the waterproof case from him and secured it to my rescue harness, then pointed him toward the water. Go. He went because when a Coast Guard officer in the middle of a rescue operation points you somewhere, you go. The swimmer brought him to the boat. I waited until I saw him climb aboard, then signaled the helicopter. We extracted in perfect formation. 16 minutes later, all 17 crew members plus 1 Norwegian researcher were aboard the North Wind, safe, shivering, alive. The Fram Nordisk sank 53 minutes later. We watched it from a safe distance as the ocean finally claimed her a slow roll, the bow pointing straight down, 1,000 tons of research vessel surrendering to the Atlantic. It was the kind of loss that stayed with you, but everyone was alive. Bergstrom was in the medical bay when I found him. The medic was checking him for hypothermia, taking his temperature, making sure the cold hadn't caused damage. He was wrapped in a thermal blanket, shivering, his dark blonde hair plastered to his forehead. When he saw me, he tried to sit up. The data? He asked immediately. Safe, secured below deck. You're going to want to check it for water damage, but the case held. Thank God. He sat back, relief washing across his face. Then thank you for coming, for the rescue, for understanding. I didn't understand. I interrupted. I thought you were being reckless, putting your crew at risk for information. I was, he said simply. But information matters, Lieutenant. Data shapes policy. The research we were conducting, it proves that the North Atlantic current system is destabilizing faster than current models predict. It proves that marine life migration is being disrupted. It proves we need to act. People matter more than data. Yes, he met my eyes. And saving people means we have to understand what's happening to the ocean. Both things are true. I didn't have a response to that. So instead, I'm Nathan, by the way. Nathan Cross Soren. He extended a shaky hand. Soren Bergstrom. From Oslo originally, but I've been based in Bergen for my research. His hand was cold, trembling slightly from hypothermia. I held it longer than I needed to. You're going to need rest, I said, finally. The medic will get you set up in the crew quarters. We'll return to Portland in approximately 4 hours. Will you? He paused. Will you check on the data? When we get there. I know it's not your responsibility, but I'll check on it, I said. He nodded, relief visible again. And as I was turning to leave, he said, you were right to be angry with me for trying to salvage data instead of prioritizing people. But you were also wrong to think that caring about the ocean means you don't care about people. Both are the same thing, Lieutenant. We save the ocean because we love the people who live near it. I left before he could see me smile. We docked in Portland at 2,130 hours. The Fram Nordist crew was transferred to a local hospital for observation and medical clearance. Soren insisted on staying with the data cases, making sure they were properly stored, checking each one for water damage. I found myself helping him. You should rest, I told him. I will. After I verify the integrity of the drives, he was examining a laptop, checking file structures, making notes. You know, in Norway, we would say you're snill, kind, good. You came into a storm for people you'd never met. That's my job. No, he said, looking up from the laptop. Your job is to calculate risk and follow protocol. Coming anyway, pushing the north wind into conditions that could have damaged her, making calls that weren't in the manual. That's not your job. That's character. Don't make me more than I am. I'm not. I'm just seeing what's there. He turned back to the laptop. In my research, we tried to see systems clearly, to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. People are like that too, I think. You can see what someone actually values by how they act under pressure. And what did you see? Someone who cares deeply about keeping people alive. Soren paused. Someone who might not understand that caring about data is also caring about people. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up a chair and helped him check the remaining drives. We worked until 0200 hours. By the time the last drive was verified and secured, Soren could barely keep his eyes open. I walked him to the crew quarters, made sure he had blankets, set up a fan so the room wouldn't be too warm. Nathan, he said as I was leaving. Thank you, really, for everything. Get some sleep, Dr. Bergstrom. Soren, just Soren, sleep. Soren, he was supposed to leave the next day. Flight back to Bergen, back to his research, back to his life. But the Fram Nordisk sinking meant insurance claims, maritime investigation, Coast Guard deposition. He ended up staying in Portland for 3 weeks, and I ended up being the officer assigned to help coordinate the investigation. We'd meet at the Coast Guard station, go over reports together. He'd explain the research, the current studies, why the data they'd risk their lives for actually mattered. I'd explain the maritime regulations, the rescue protocols, why pushing a cutter into a nor'easter was supposed to violate operational guidelines, but sometimes was necessary anyway. By week 2, we were getting coffee between official meetings, you know, he said one afternoon, sitting in a Portland coffee shop overlooking the harbor. I came to America to present research at conferences. I wasn't supposed to have a dramatic maritime rescue. That wasn't on my itinerary. Sorry for the inconvenience, I said. We tried to give our visiting researchers a gentler introduction to Maine. This introduction has been unforgettable. He was watching the harbor, where fishing boats were coming in with the afternoon catch. You know what's strange? I was terrified when I saw your ship coming through the storm, terrified. But the moment I realized you were going to save us, the moment I realized you were the one making the decisions, I felt calm. Because I could see you were the kind of person who would rather break protocol than lose someone. You gave me a lot of credit for that rescue, because you deserved it. Soren turned to look at me. In my country, we value duty. We value protocol. We follow rules. But we also understand that sometimes the right thing and the rule are different things. When I saw that you understood that, he paused. I realized I wanted to know you better. We're getting to know each other, are we? There was something in his eyes that made my chest tight. Or are we just professionally cooperating while we investigate a maritime disaster? What do you want to happen? I want to take you to dinner on a date, where we talk about things that aren't research or Coast Guard protocol or salvage data. Where we just, he smiled. Where I get to find out if you're interesting outside of being heroic. I'm not that interesting. Let me be the judge of that. So we went to dinner at a seafood place overlooking Portland Harbor, watching the sunset over the Atlantic that had nearly killed him 3 weeks prior. Soren told me about his research, 8 years of data collection, thousands of hours analyzing currents, teams of researchers spread across 3 countries. He told me about Bergen, about growing up in Norway, about the moment he realized that understanding the ocean was the same as understanding the future. I told him about the academy, about my family, about why I'd chosen the Coast Guard over my father's suggestion to do something less dangerous, about the moment I realized that protocol mattered, but people mattered more. You chose the dangerous path, Soren said, because you wanted to help people. And I chose the research path because I wanted to help the ocean. But it's the same thing, really. We're both trying to save something we love. Is that what this is? I asked, saving something we love? I don't know yet, Soren said, but I want to find out. He kissed me as the sun was touching the horizon, and it tasted like sea salt and inevitability, like something that had been decided the moment he refused to leave his vessel, and I pushed the north wind into the storm to bring him home. For months later, Soren had moved to Portland. He negotiated a position with the University of Southern Maine's Marine Science Program, continuing his North Atlantic research, but based in Maine instead of Norway. His apartment was in the old port, overlooking the same harbor where we'd had our first dinner. He'd brought his research data, his equipment, his life, and most importantly, he'd brought himself. We'd fall into routine side work, a shift on the north wind, come home to his apartment, and find him at his desk analyzing current data, surrounded by maps and scientific instruments. He'd cook Norwegian food, and I'd introduce him to Maine traditions. We'd fight sometimes about his tendency to take risks with his research, about my habit of over-planning everything, but we'd also laugh, often at the exact same moment, discovering we had the same sense of humor about completely different things. Tell me something, Soren said one evening, as we were looking at current maps he'd updated with new data. When you decided to push the north wind into the storm, did you think I'd turn out to be? He gestured vaguely. This infuriatingly brilliant and stubborn? I was going to say worth it. But yes, that too. He leaned back in his chair. In rescue operations, you calculate risk. You weigh probability. You make decisions based on data. I did the same thing with you, actually. Calculated whether it was worth staying in Portland, whether my research could continue, whether the risk of loving someone was worth the potential payoff. And what did your calculation say? That I would be a fool not to try. He pulled me down to his chair, made me sit on his lap like we were teenagers instead of 2 grown men in his apartment. You broke protocol to save people. I violated maritime law to save data. We're both people who love things enough to break rules. Maybe we're exactly what each other needs. Maybe we are, I said, and I kissed him. The maps scattered. The data could wait. Some things mattered more than protocol, more than procedure. More than the careful calculations that kept the world orderly, some people required you to jump into the storm and trust that you'd survive. Soren and I had learned that lesson the hard way, and we'd spend the rest of our lives proving that we were worth the risk. Epilogue 6 months later, Coast Guard recognizes me for the rescue operation. The maritime investigation concludes the Frem Nordisk sank due to mechanical failure and crew error. No citations against the service. Soren's research is published in 3 major scientific journals, cited by ocean policy experts, and contributes to a new marine protection initiative for the North Atlantic. But none of that matters as much as the fact that we're standing in front of his apartment tower apartment now. Because I moved in month 3 and he's holding a small box. I have a question, he says. In the storm, you calculated risk and made a decision to save me. In Norway, when you calculate long-term risk, you have to account for the joy factor, the emotional payoff of the decision. And I calculated that having you in my life is worth every possible risk. Soren, so I'm asking, Nathan, will you marry me? I take the box, open it, and find a simple band of white gold with a sapphire the color of the North Atlantic on a clear day. Yes, I say. And I kiss him there on the street, in front of his building, in front of Portland, in front of the same harbor where our story started a year ago. I would have said love was too risky to calculate, too unpredictable, too dangerous, too much like jumping into a storm without knowing if you'd survive. But Soren taught me that some storms you survive not by avoiding them, but by facing them with someone who understands why you had to jump in the first place. He was worth the risk. He still is.